Hey everybody, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Michael Bryant. I'm here with Michael Bachner, and we have got a basket full of goodies to talk to you about today. But first, one thought that I think overrides everything we're going to talk about. What in the HE double hockey sticks, Stanley Cup time, you know, what in the HE double hockey sticks is going on here? We've got a defendant representing herself in a murder case. No open, no cross, apparently no close, but she wants to talk to the judge now in private, in chambers, an ex parte proceeding. Is that going to happen? Speaking of behind closed doors, we've got Robert Kraft with a video that allegedly shows him doing some things behind closed doors that he wants suppressed in a simple case of 2 misdemeanors, solicitation of prostitution. I mean, we're kind of through the looking glass here, people. Credit to Kevin Costner, JFK the movie. We're here in the courtroom there in Florida, and this is the Robert Kraft case. Remember, he was arrested for a couple of misdemeanor counts of soliciting prostitution. He said, I'm not guilty. He pled not guilty, asked for a trial. Prior to that trial, he is now having this suppression hearing. His attorneys are saying, hey, look, that video was wrongfully obtained, should never have been obtained, and obviously that's the key piece of evidence in the case. I don't know that I agree that if that is suppressed, he gets out scot-free. But let's talk about that. We've been talking about all kinds of stuff while this testimony's been underway. I'm with Michael Bachner, defense attorney. Let's start with just the basics here. The Fourth Amendment right to an expectation of privacy. Where does it end, if not at the place you're getting a massage, most likely naked?
Well, I think the court's going to come out that there was an expectation of privacy. And all that does is give Kraft the right to move to suppress. You can't suppress something if you don't have a right of privacy in it. So if I'm in somebody else's car, for example, and the cops do an illegal stop of that car, because it's not my car, I may not have an expectation of privacy in another person's car, so I may not be able to move to suppress. It's clear that he has standing here, in my opinion. The issue is going to be whether or not the warrant was good, regardless.
Okay, so, and they're talking now about the details behind obtaining the warrant, the bomb threat that was used to clear the buildings so they could install cameras. 4 to 5 hours to install these cameras. They had 5 cameras. They had a switcher. They had basically a TV studio set up in their surveillance. Does that sound a little bit much for this kind of crime?
Well, look, sometimes police departments in smaller areas, they don't have much to do sometimes.
That's a good excuse. We got a lot of tax dollars.
Well,
that's
And number two, they may consider this conduct. It's from a law enforcement perspective. I'm a defense lawyer, but from a law enforcement perspective, it's illegal prostitution that's going on, and they have an obligation to enforce the laws against prostitution. So that's what they did. They went to court, they're going to say. They had a judge sign off on the warrant, and they did it all right, and their view, the prosecution's view, is if the defense, if the jury thinks that we went too far, they can still acquit. If they think that they don't like the case, let a jury decide. Yeah. But as far as we're concerned, this is an appropriate use of our law enforcement.
And I think if the jury sees that video, it may be tough for them to just ignore it, I think. This is one very active courtroom here and one very large suppression hearing. This is the Robert Kraft matter in which the owner of the Patriots is trying to suppress the video of him allegedly getting serviced by 1 or 2 folks at a massage parlor in Florida. With me is Michael Bachner, and we've been going through what this testimony means, what the process is about, and what the defense really wants. One of their arguments is, hey, you didn't need the videotape. You've got all kinds of other evidence. You had guys going in there who admitted that they received services beyond massage. You checked the trash. You found materials in the trash supporting the fact there was some sort of sexual activity. All of this, you already had that. Why do we need the videotape?
Well, the answer is, from their perspective, is they're not just looking at a misdemeanor prostitution situation. They were looking at what they thought was a much larger enterprise that they were alleging was occurring here, a much more serious enterprise that they thought it was occurring. And they were saying this was in a strip mall and kind of like a family environment, and that we wanted to go in. And look, from a law enforcement perspective as well, you're not going to catch the quote-unquote John, that is the gentleman going in there, by only going in and arresting the individuals doing the servicing. Once they're out, you don't know what they did until you get them on tape. So if the theory is I want to also catch the people who are enabling the conduct, then they're saying, then how else do I do that?
Yeah, and I know they're suggesting that this was not about those individual misdemeanors. This was about the bigger process, the criminal activity within the business itself. I just had a thought, though, that they did their bomb scare to clear the place out. I'm sure Publix Market, which is in that mall, was very happy to shut their doors for 5 hours, as were these other mom-and-pop type stores while they put their cameras in. But that's an aside. So what do you think happens if this tape is suppressed? Nobody sees the video in the trial going forward.
I think if the tape gets suppressed, they're still going to go forward. Kraft is not going to take a plea, and their only other option would be to dismiss the case. And that will become somewhat problematic for the prosecution without the tape, because what they're going to have to do is either cut some type of deal with the women who were servicing Mr. Kraft allegedly, or they're going to have to immunize them. That is, agree not to prosecute them at all. And then it looks like now you're immunizing the people ostensibly running the enterprise to get some poor schmo who's coming in there on an occasion or two, even though it looks like Mr. Kraft may have been going in there on more than an occasion or two, given what appears to be the kind of familiar relationship ostensibly that exists according to the warrant anyway, or the memorandum between him and these women. So it's going to be a tough case if the tape gets tossed. And look, you're going to have a jury out there who could decide they want to do what we know is jury nullification. That is, we don't really care what happened. We think this is a stupid case, a waste of time, not guilty.
Yeah. And why did you make me watch that tape? Yes, correct. That could be also a problem. Yeah, I get it, and it makes perfect sense. It's really explains why everybody's fighting so hard on both sides for this particular tape, to come in for the pros and stay out for the defense. Okay, so Michael Bachner is here. He's been with me since we began, and joining us, just popping in, Imran Ansari, you were supposed to be here, but you're late. It was a super secret meeting I can't talk about, right? That's all I can say.
No comment for now.
No comment. Thank you for that official response. So you've been watching this Kraft matter unfold. Give me some initial thoughts.
Right. Well, I think essentially it's really very fascinating when you have to think that they're looking at this sneak and peek warrant, right? And it's a question of what was the intent? What was the intent of the Patriot Act where they brought this sort of sneak and peek warrant into play? What is someone's reasonable expectation of privacy in a place like a massage room? And I think, I looked at the defense papers, and they're basically putting out the argument out there. You allow this to go forward, you allow this evidence to come into court based on this sort of warrant. It's a slippery slope. It could be in massage rooms, it could be in a mall's dressing room. It's a slippery slope. So I think it's very fascinating. It has larger Fourth Amendment issues. Of course, it's very sexy in terms of the subject matter with Robert Kraft here. But I think the decision in the Florida court is going to have a resounding sort of effect on the way these sneak and peek warrants are handled, the way the Patriot Act, which envisioned these sort of warrants, are applied to non-terroristic situations, to everyday sort of law enforcement in a situation like this, which is essentially a prostitution sting. I know they at first were looking at it as a human trafficking enterprise, but ultimately we know the prosecution put that away and put that aside, and we're looking at a prostitution sting, essentially.
So let me ask you what I asked Michael before, and that was, the video is out. They are successful in this suppression hearing. Does the case go forward? What's the result?
Well, I think the case is going to have to go forward now. I think the prosecution are sort of in it. They have to go forward with the case. Robert Kraft, he's going to be putting on a defense. I don't expect Robert Kraft to take a plea. I think this case would go to trial. Ultimately, if the video is suppressed, I think the prosecution is going to have a harder time. And we're going to have to see how the jury really looks at this. You have Robert Kraft, who's a very public figure, which, if it wasn't Robert Kraft, it was someone his age who went to a massage parlor, had a sexual contact with one of these masseuses. Would it really be in the news? Would we really be hearing about it? Would the jury really take it as seriously as they would, if it was just everyday Joe
Schmo? A regular
Schmo.
guy,
Yep.
a regular Imran, just anybody.
Right.
The defense counsel for Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, is still working over this one main witness, one of maybe 30, if we believe what they suggest they're going to put on for this motion. And really, the whole thing is about what the police needed to do to get the evidence for the warrant, and if they had all of this other evidence, why did they need to use hidden camera video? That's what it's all about. So I'm here with my guests for the afternoon, Michael Bachner and Imran Ansari. Let me ask both you guys. Let me start with you, Michael. If Robert Kraft is not involved in this case, it's just Dave, Fred, Bill, Joe, whomever, are we going to see this kind of battle? Are we going to see a different result?
We're not going to see, likely not going to see this type of a battle, depending on who the potential defendant in the cases, but normally these cases are resolved as the offer was to Mr. Kraft. That is, enter a plea, and we'll dismiss the case once you're a good boy and go through programs and some type of situations where you learn about the dangers of what you're doing, and the case gets dismissed. And for the general person on the street, that's wonderful. For Kraft, where he's worried about losing his football team, the impact is significant, and reputationally, it's significant. I think it's really the football aspect of the case, because his reputation's, everyone knows what happened, right?
Right. Now, Imran, you mentioned they go to John School, or they have some sort of like traffic school, but for solicitation suspects or defendants. Is that what it is?
Right. So, I'm a former prosecutor with the Brooklyn DA's office. I do criminal defense. I know Michael practices here in New York City, so he's well aware of these programs. So they have these diversion programs for what is considered a low-level crime, a misdemeanor crime, a vice crime. And if you are a John who is arrested in a prostitution sting, often you would get an ACD, which is an adjournment in contemplation of dismissal, which stay out of trouble for 6 months, and then you get your case dismissed. And coupled with that, tied with that, is a thing called John School. And it's essentially the defendant, part of the ACD plea, goes to a program, learns about the sort of ills of prostitution, human trafficking, and likewise, the alleged prostitute is offered a similar sort of program, which is I think it's called Project Spotlight here in New York City. And it's a program, essentially a slap on the wrist with the ACD, and a program to hopefully get the John to recognize the ills of prostitution, and for the alleged prostitute to maybe find a way out of this line of work.
So, but we've got Robert Kraft, and so because we have Robert Kraft involved, we have this. And this motion to suppress the video hearing will continue in Florida, as we will continue here on the Law and Crime Network. And welcome back to the Law and Crime Network, everybody. I'm Michael Bryant with you for the balance of the afternoon session. I have Michael Bachner here, and I have Mr. Imran Ansari. So we're in the courtroom there in Florida. This is the Robert Kraft suppression motion to keep that video out from the view of the jury at the ultimate trial, if it happens. Michael Bachner, defense attorney, and Imran Ansari are here, former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney. So we're hearing a lot of the same thing here, and we're hearing, I want to give her credit, Elizabeth Neto is the blonde young woman there on the far right. You see her pop up and down quite often, objecting all over the place, and she's had enough. It's pretty clear. From your guys' perspective, let me start with you, Michael. Are we just beating this thing too much? Do we need to move on, even though it is the bench that's hearing it, not a jury?
Well, I think the judge made it pretty clear that Alex Spiro has done a good job at bringing out the fact that there were other alternatives that he could have used before getting a search warrant or trying to get the officer to elicit it, and the officer denied that. But the judge gets it. This is not his first rodeo. And I think he's basically saying to Spiro, you did your job, and why don't we go on to something else? So there are diminishing returns here. Witnesses like police officers, they're hard enough to begin with. They generally get better. They don't get worse. They're bulletproof, as we like to say oftentimes anyway. And, all of Spiro's what appear to be badgering to the prosecution becomes a point where the cop gets used to it, and his answers, I think, are getting more focused and better. So I'd probably end this pretty soon and go to something new.
Move to something new. Imran, what do you think in terms of the big picture? If you're the judge, you're presented with the prospect of 30 witnesses. What do you need to know before you allow that many? And what's your kind of checklist to whittle that thing down?
Sure. I mean, this is a suppression hearing, and I understand that this particular piece of evidence is critical for the prosecution and the defense, but I would ask for an offer of proof. I would want to know what these witnesses are going to bring to the table, what they will be testifying to, what is the relevance of their testimony, is it material and necessary for the court to make a decision on the suppression hearing before allowing basically a unfettered parade of witnesses before the court. The court has to keep judicial expediency in mind, focus on the issue, and it's a suppression hearing. The issue is very focused. You see Spiro now going again on other areas, what could have been less intrusive. I think he's already covered those bases. But with this amount of, that's an extraordinary amount of witnesses for a suppression hearing. I would ask for an offer of proof if I was the judge.
So it's possible, if it goes to trial, it could be shorter than the suppression hearing. Would you agree? Right, guys? Okay, well, hopefully, I don't know, maybe we won't find out. It all depends on if we can make it through the suppression hearing. So we'll have more of that from Florida when we come right back to the Law and Crime Network. Michael Bachner, defense attorney Imran Ansari, thank you guys for stopping by. I appreciate the insights. As always, fascinating stories we've been dealing with here today. Very odd, very unusual. And thank you for joining us. I'm Michael Bryant. That's going to wrap things up for this afternoon session. Stand by for the Daily Debrief. Aaron Keller coming up with more right here on the Law and Crime Network. Have a good night.